Well, I thank you all for joining us this evening, the Access Pacific chapter of the Access User Groups. I'm George Hepworth, chapter president. Tonight, we're going to have a presentation from two of our superstars, Crystal Long and Geoffrey L. Griffith. I'm going to call you Geoff from now on, but I know your full
That's
name.
perfect.
But before we jump into the presentation, I will just want to remind you, please keep your video and your audio turned off unless we have questions. I'll ask you, Crystal and Geoff, do you want questions before, during, or after your presentation? What's your preferred uh, standard for questions?
Normally I say anytime, but right now I want to be brief because Geoff has a whole lot to talk about. So I'd rather people just write their questions down and we'll cover them at the end.
Yeah, and I'll just ask at the end of certain sections about questions, if that's okay, and then we
Okay.
can answer then.
Okay.
I
So
have that sort of built in.
okay, great. We can just wait until you get to a natural pausing place. And if you put your questions in the chat with the Q in front of them, we can also go back through the chat at those points and pick those up. Before we jump into the presentation, then I want to talk about a couple of things. Well, first, news came out today. The version 2.4 of the Northwind Starter and developer templates are currently being deployed, although there have been a couple of hiccups. Wait a couple of days till they get those cleared up. And the 2.4 version primarily adds some accessibility things like colors and fonts that make it easier, hopefully make it easier for people with disabilities to use and follow them. That was a big emphasis from Microsoft all the way through. And in this version, we really implemented as much of that as we possibly could. Access has some built-in limitations, but we did the best we could. And we also fixed as many bugs as we had reported. Hang on, it might come out. It might be ready in a day or two. The Access roadmap, briefly, Monaco SQL editor. Today, I got an email from Carl Dunnebauer that the current version, which is 2411 build 16.0.18 to 27.20082, has some new bug fixes in the Monaco SQL editor. So if you've tried the SQL editor and had some frustration, check it again. Some of the more serious bugs have been fixed. I think there are still some things that need to be addressed, but they've made a lot of bug fixes in the last few weeks. What else? We've got large monitor support coming. We talked about that last month in our presentation. That's coming down the road. We're going to see, hopefully, in the near future, bigger than 22-inch forms, zooming and can shrink and can grow. Integrated source code control is in the plan. It's on the roadmap. And so I scheduled a presentation for February on a source code control application written by Adam Waller. I talked to him several months ago, and then we had a full schedule, and I was actually planning not to be here after this month. But then I decided it would be really unprofessional if I just walked away and left the cupboard bare. So I scheduled at least one presentation in the new year. Hopefully somebody else will be the host by then, but at least there will be presentations. And as always, there are no commitments on a timetable on when any of this will happen. Okay.
So I can I ask a quick question. Who is going to be the new host?
Do I hear a volunteer?
Okay, I see.
I've asked everybody that I thought would be interested or a good fit. And so far, those two criteria have not matched up. Unless Crystal's changed her mind. I take silence as a no.
I guess that's a no.
Take silence as a no. Okay, I just want to go briefly cover some of the other chapters presentations coming up. Kent has scheduled in Access Express Australia, data type mapping when you're moving from Access to SQL Server. The Italia chapter has, and I won't even attempt the Italian version. I had Google Translate tell me what he meant, how to make some standard access controls more user-friendly. And Alessandro is really a whiz with user interfaces, so that should be good. SQL with Access, Access with SQL Server. This is an Azure MVP who's going to do this presentation on ingesting pipeline data ingesting pipelines from Azure IoT hubs to SQL Azure. And that's something that Juan in his business, his company is interested in, and he's going to share some insights from the Azure MVP who does that. I'm sorry, names are not my strong point. I should be naming names, but I don't ever remember. Access Europe, next presentation is a different approach to COM add-ins. Philip Stiefel is going to be presenting that one. And for January, I'm going to do a little song and dance. I promised you if I didn't have a presentation, I'd come and sing and dance for you. And I'm going to talk about some ideas I have had for a long time about ways to make transition from one developer a little easier when you're handing off projects. And of course, that was in the front of my mind when I was talking about handing off this chapter, and it just was a natural flow. So the title is Eliminating Magic Numbers in VBA, but I'll talk about some related ideas about making your code maybe more developer friendly, so that as you transition projects, you leave a roadmap for the next person that comes along. Hopefully by January, I'm still not giving up hope that somebody else will actually be the host and I can just be the presenter for that. But I will talk about, like I say, ideas I have about making your code more accessible for the follow-on developer who comes along behind. So with that, are there any other announcements or comments before we move on to the actual presentation? Okie doke then. So Crystal, you're going to go first. I'll
Okay.
stop sharing. You can share your screen and take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Let me share. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Happy you're here. Thanks to George for hosting this meeting. And thanks to Geoff for presenting an alternate way to make add-ins that will work in other Office products using the Visual Studio tools. And Geoff, although he might not tell you, used to be on the Access team. He's a brilliant guy and has lots of knowledge about Access and insights about all kinds of things. I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of creating and using applications or add-ins for Access. And then Geoff will give you the essentials you need to know about creating COM add-ins, which work across all Office. And if you have questions about the Access add-ins, just put them in the chat so I can keep my part of the presentation short and give Geoff enough time to cover what you need to know to make COM add-ins with VSTO, which is way more complex than making an add-in for Access. And then after we both present, I will stay as long as George holds the meeting open. So what is an add-in? An add-in is software you can install once and then it's always available. You can run it anytime you're in Access or the application that it's designed for. And the types of add-ins you'll see today are Access add-ins and COM add-ins. And I'm going to be talking about Access add-ins. And I have this presentation that you can download, and George has the link for it. And I'm not really going to cover a whole lot in depth here. I'll just quickly go through these how to run an Access add-in, because I'm actually going to show you these things. And some of the Access add-ins that I'll show you are listed here. And one of them that I just find super, super handy is documenting the SQL in queries, forms, reports. It creates a Word document, and it also runs the SQL, and it tells you if it's bad, which means, oh, golly, the SQL you have in there just doesn't work. And it also formats the SQL. So this is a Word document that you're seeing on the right-hand side. And another thing that I like is the SQL Spacer add-in. Now, Monaco is just out, and that separates keywords each on their own line, but mine does just a little bit more. It doesn't have the colors, but it also separates each field or expression on its own line, which I think makes SQL easier to read. Then just you can look at it or put it in your code, whatever you want to do with it. You can also save the workspace you have. So that's another add-in. Right now, I only have it saving the table layouts and their positions, but you could modify that and save all the windows. And another one that I like and use sometimes when I get forms with a whole lot of hotkeys, I want to see, well, what are all the hotkeys that I'm using on this form? So I have a little add-in I can run that tells me that. And this one is I probably use the most. It colors the code. So on the left-hand side, I just dump in code, and on the right-hand side, it adds the tags that I need to just put it right there onto my web page, which you'll see on the right, and it colors it and makes it pretty and easier to read. And another part of the color code add-in, which actually isn't part of the color code add-in, but at the bottom, see the set sub-data sheet none. I do this a lot too. When I open up a database, I will run that. I'll just set all the sub-data sheets to none for all of the tables, so it'll count how many are not none, and it'll set them. And another add-in that I have is just a data dictionary add-in, and it shows you information about the structure of each of your tables, and you choose whatever table you want in the list, and then it shows you everything in just this columnar form, which I find a lot nicer to be able to see what's going on than going into the table design, having to click on each field and then look at the bottom, and then you can't see everything in one pretty good list. Now, when you're going to create an add-in, well, what makes it different? First of all, it has a USys info table, which I'll show you. And you don't have to set database properties, but you can. And if you do, then they'll show up on your add-ins menu. And then in VBA, when you're writing the VBA in the add-in, CodeDB references the add-in database, and CurrentDB references the database that the user has open. So the usage reg info table, and here's where I'm just going to jump out, and I'm going to open up one of the databases that I already have it open. So here's a database that I have open, and I have some tables open. And let's say that I want to save the positions of these tables. So I can go under Database Tools to my Add-ins menu, go to the Workspace menu, and I can just save this. And now it saved the workspace for 4 tables. I'll just close these. And let's say, oh, anytime, I'll close that too. Anytime I want to get that back, I can just go back to my workspace menu, restore, and bang, it opens up everything I had, and all the tables anyway, and positions them in the way they were before. Another add-in that I use a lot is this SQL Spacer. I've temporarily turned off Monaco. In fact, I made a little macro to, let me just show you. I made a little macro to turn Monaco on or off, and it says it's currently not on. I can enable it or not enable it. Right now, I'm just going to cancel it. I just really wanted to kind of make sure it was off. The document SQL, let's say I have a lot of queries in here, and I want to know the SQL for all of them. Now, when it does test these queries, one thing I did not put in there, all these action queries, they're going to test as bad because they actually don't return any records. But I could choose queries, and what it'll do is it'll go ahead and create a Word document. And apparently one of the tables I'm linked to is not good, and it doesn't like that. So I will just show you the documentation that it created before. It was working just fine, of course. And I think so it creates a folder called documentation underneath your database. And in each one of these is a Word document. So I've already run this. So I'm actually just going to open up Word here. And the reason I have to open up Word without not just double click on that, well, actually I could, but I have two versions of Word installed. So this one is the later version. So this is what it created. And like I said, this is an append query. It says it's bad just because it couldn't return records, but see how nicely this is formatted. And then you can also search all the SQL statements for anything you want to be able to see. If I go to my data dictionary add-in, I can pick a table, any table, pick a table, any table, as long as it's a table. And it will show me the structure of that. Now, I created another thing today that I thought, oh, this would be cool if this was an add-in. So I created a form. Where did Access go? I thought it would be really useful to be able to toggle the case of something. Let's say you have your caps lock on, and I'll just make this bigger. This stretches as you type. So let's say I have my caps lock on and say the house is at the end of the road. Oh gosh, the end of the roof. And now I'm like, oh, my caps lock was on. I don't want to have to retype that. So here I just made it so it'll just toggle the case, or I can turn it all into uppercase, or I can turn it all into lowercase, or I can turn it into proper case. So I thought this would be pretty cool to make an add-in out of. So I actually made a database, and sadly, oh yeah, somebody that I really admire and respect said, oh no, you don't have to be logged in as an administrator to install an add-in. You can do it without doing all that. And so I thought, okay, I'll try it. So today I tried it. Bad day to try it. Well, it does show up on my add-ins list. Oh, good, it went away. One of the reasons why I rebooted is to see if I could actually install this again so I could make it an add-in. I'll close this form. The way to install an add-in is you need to run Access as an administrator. So if I go over to the Access icon, I made an Access icon on my desktop. I can just right click on it and run as administrator. And I discovered today you actually really do have to do this. If somebody tells you you don't, well, if you try it, you're going to be in trouble, like I was today. And I'll just open up the database that I just had open. Any database you want is fine. Now I'll go under database tools, add-ins, and what I did is go to the add-in manager and let's make sure it's gone. Oh, good. I tried to make it gone and it actually is gone. So I'm going to add a new one. And this is the directory where all the add-ins are located once you install them, but this is not where the add-in is located that I want to install. So I'll just go to the location where it is, tools, add-ins, and my toggle case add-in. I'll open that up and now I'll just close this and I'll see if the toggle case add-in is there. Let's say I do road, all in capital letters here. Oh, and of course I could just easily correct that pretty quickly, but I open my toggle case add-in. Oh, okay. So I still have some hoops to jump through because I tried to install it without actually running Access as an administrator. Not only did it not work, it shows up on the menu, but it is not installed properly. And so I won't be trying anything new like that when I'm going to present the same day. So sorry, I was hoping to actually show you how to make the add-in work, how to install the add-in, but it's just not going to work. Now I told you also that let me start with another slide, that when you install an add-in, one of the things you can do if you want is set your database properties. It's optional, but a good idea. So the three that it pays attention to are title, company, and comments. And then I have, this is the PowerPoint, just instructions on installing an Access add-in. Make the ACCDB, set up a USIS reg info table, which I'll show you. You can optionally define database properties, create what you want the add-in to do. Important, run Access as an administrator. Do not try to install an add-in without doing this. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems, have to edit your registry, do some other gymnastics just to make it go away so you can install it properly. And same thing with uninstalling. Always run as an administrator if you're going to install or uninstall. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to make an add-in. And I have the registry location that you can reference and where the add-in files go and the demo, which I've already actually shown you, creating a new add-in. And on the toggle case database that I made, that I created an add-in from, if you go to the database properties, these are the three properties I filled out because those are the three properties that an add-in picks up on its menu, which I'll show you again in just a moment. And I have a page with very intense steps for installing and just setting up Microsoft Access add-ins. And then let me just come down here and open up my toggle case add-in. So what I did to make this add-in is that form that I showed you in the database, I just put it in here. And then on File, Info, Database Properties, I just filled out these three things. And then the other thing I did is I set up this USys reg info table. Now, obviously, system objects have to be on to see this. So if you go to your navigation options, you're going to have this show system objects checkbox checked in order to see it. And the easiest way to create this is just to import it from another database and then just go over here and change the values. Now, each one of these subkeys is just exactly the same. This is what's going to show up if I go to database tools and I go to add-ins and I'll just go to the add-in manager to show you. Oh, okay, Wizard's in a bad state. If I pick an add-in, well, uh, I'm sorry I didn't run as administrator earlier. I'm sorry that I tested. I really thought that other guy was smarter than me, but in this case, for this point, he wasn't. The library, this is where where it's going to go. And this vertical bar actor just is a placeholder for the directory that it's going to be in. This is this should have been ACCDA. Oh, that could have been another problem. This is going to be the name. This is the name of the actual file. So I got that wrong. The procedure that it's going to launch and a description of it. And these other things, they're just optional. You don't need to specify those. But in a nutshell, that is how easy it is to make an Access application and add in. And I will go back now to Geoff. Geoff is going now. Access add-ins, although I had trouble because I did not follow my own directions. So on this web page, which I'll put a link in the chat if nobody else has done it, I have a web page on how to install an Access add-in, and this run Access as administrator is an important step to do. And like I said, though, I also messed up on the name because I did rename it to a ACCDA instead of an ACCDB, and I did not use the right name in my USys reg info table. So that could have been another reason why I had a problem with this. But this web page guides you through installing, and then you can get the add-ins on your menu. And I am going to stop sharing and
Okay, can we take a few questions?
sure.
So I see in the chat at least 4 questions. Adrian asked the first one. Is CodeDB a function like current DB open parent, closed parent is?
You know, it probably is, Adrian. Gosh, you would ask that.
Do you know, it doesn't matter because I can find out. The other
Yeah,
one, Eric's and my other question are probably more important than that one, to be fair.
it probably is. And when I'm writing code, that's one of the reasons why it's so easy to just turn your code into an add-in, because most of us use current DB in our code. And then if though the add-in has its own tables or its own forms or things you want to reference, then you need code DB in there. But most of the time, you're going to be wanting the add-in to be referencing the database that the user has open, not itself.
Okay. Eric has a couple of questions. Eric Blomquist. How does this compare and contrast with a library database reference in the VBE?
Well, that's a really good question. In fact, I was actually also going to show something, just another version of something that you can do is with add-ins is, well, not add-ins, but another way that you can do things is with the library database. Now, the advantage of a library database is you reference it and everything in it is automatically loaded when you open up Access, whereas add-ins aren't loaded until you actually use them. So you could have a ton of add-ins and they do not get loaded unless you actually invoke them.
Okay. Well, I have been using a library database. If somebody wants, I can show you that later on. Eric's second question for you is, do your Access add-ins have an ACCDA file extension? And I think you already answered that.
Well, and I generally do an ACCDA file extension. I'll just rename an ACCDB to ACCDA. I'm not sure it's actually required to rename it having an A, but I just generally do that just to show that it's capable of being an add-in. As well as you can just open it up. If you double click on a ACCDA, it'll just open it up just like a regular Access database.
So Adrian's question is next. If you have multiple ACCDAs, can you reference them from within the current DB code?
Only if they're loaded. And I actually did some testing with this, but in order to reference them, they have to be loaded. They don't get loaded until you actually invoke them. So I think if you're going to do that, it would be better to use library databases.
Okay, that's not the question about library. This is about add-ins. If you want to reference them, how do you what do you use as a reference? You said earlier code DB, but there's going to be presumably more than one code DB. I can't imagine that code DB.
What I meant by reference, I mean in your add-in itself, if your VBA code references, like you know how you'll do like current DB dot table defs or dot open record set or something like that. If you want it to do it on the add-in database, you use code DB instead of current DB. Now, in referencing a function of an add-in in code that's not in the add-in, there is a way to do it. I have it written down. I didn't pull it up, but I can certainly pull it up while Geoff is presenting, and I can answer that later on.
Or if it's on your web page, then that should be good enough.
It's not.
Okay.
Okay, one more question. Ron asked, can an add-in database be replaced with an update without reinstalling it?
No, no. In fact, that's a really good question. You have to uninstall it, and you need to be running as an administrator to do that. And then you add it back again, running as an administrator. You can't just replace the file. I've tried that. It's also not a very good idea. You have to recover from something like that.